Hello everybody and welcome. Just 1 second while I kill the video. There we go. Right. Other presenters, if you could please turn your cameras on now, otherwise you'll leave me on my own for the whole of this. Thank you very much. So thanks for joining everybody. This is the Consultancy Roundtable and Q&A, the final webinar in our VTC series. And as you can see, we're having a bit of, I don't know, do you call this fun, wearing weird shirts? So just for everybody's benefit, Dave thought it would be a great idea the other day if we all wore funky shirts, and has been the only person who hasn't, bar Martin. So there we go. I'm wearing lemurs, and yes, it is buttoned up. But Dave, do you want to just show your contribution to this? And you're muted. But okay.
There you go. So some Hawaiian shorts.
There we go. So basically this session is a roundup pretty much of all the other webinars that we've had. Because one thing we've noticed for the last 2 to 3 weeks we've been doing this is there are lots and lots of questions coming in from all the sessions we've been doing. And we wanted to make sure that you guys had an opportunity to basically ask us anything. So if there's anything you wanted to ask on a previous webinar but didn't have the opportunity to, if there's anything that's come up since, if there's any combination of things that you've seen that you've thought actually, there's some joined up thinking we can do here, or some, just some general questions you have about what you're trying to accomplish in your own environment and your own infrastructure, and you would like a bit of help, that is what we're here for. So the success of this whole session relies solely on you guys asking us questions. If you don't, it's going to be a very, very quick and extremely awkward webinar. So I'm just going to introduce the guys that we have on. So I'm James Dancer. I'm Group Technical Director for Academia and Atama. And depending on the order of people, I'm going to go to my right. We have Martin Deutschler, who is our Apple Solutions Manager. We have Dave Prince, who is our lead Microsoft and infrastructure consultant, and the only other person who wore a funky shirt is Gary Collins, who is our lead MDM consultant. So bear in mind, we might not be able to answer every single thing that you have to throw at us. We probably be able to, but anything that we can't answer, please, we'll take that away and we'll come back to you afterwards, and we'll make sure we do catch up with everything. So couple of things, bit of housekeeping. You've probably seen the chat window on your right. I know at least one of you has. There's a little box at the bottom to type in your comments. Just above that, to the top right, there is a little bubble that you can change chat mode to Q&A mode. That puts like a little red dot with a Q in it next to what you type. And that means that we will be able to notice it as a question if there's any other chat going on. And it means we can check it off when we've answered. So if you forget, don't worry. Once you've typed something, there is still that little circle you can click to put a red Q in it. And we have Ryan from our marketing team moderating, so he will do it if you forget. So I'm going to start off launching a quick poll, which means I need a little bit of time to do that. So gents, you are going to be dumped in it in a second. The other thing to bear in mind is there's about a 10-second delay between what we say and what we see in chat, just so we've got a kill switch if we need it for whatever reason. So please bear that in mind. If we're not getting back to you immediately, that's why. So I'm going to write up and launch a quick poll right now, so you'll see that shortly. Please answer it as soon as you see it. But round the room, starting in the order in which I introduce people. So Martin, you first. Would you just like to give a quick summary of what you've seen from the webinars that you've been involved in and presented, and the kind of things that people have been interested in, and what you think we're likely to get today?
Yeah, sure. Thanks very much. Only did one webinar across the last week personally, which was with James, which was on remote accessing Macs, both for accessing suites using No Machine and admin access using a software-defined network called Zero Tier. I'd say the majority of questions we got there were actually surrounding the legality of licensing software on remote machines. The general takeaway we found, and we have done some digging since, is that in almost all cases, it doesn't breach any licensing requirements because you're using concurrent licenses mostly, and you're accessing machines that have the software registered through them. If you're not on concurrent, then you're still not breaching the number of licenses in use. So that came up quite a bit. Beyond that, there were some technical demonstrations in it, and I think for the most part we covered most people's technical issues with regards to that. Do have one ongoing which I'm still trying to find a solution for, which is how you approve No Machine on a machine that is not enrolled properly into your MDM and doesn't have UA MDM accepted. But other than that, I think we managed to cover everything. Moving over to, was it Dave or Gary next?
It will be Dave next, who is still muted by the sound.
Turn on his microphone. So, yeah, I've had 3 webinars so far. One covering accessing your data remotely using Folder, benefits of that. One covering Intune, how you'd go about managing your Windows estate via MDM, Microsoft's cloud-based solution, Intune. And then quite a big one was actually how you get those devices into Intune. So in this case, it was predominantly focusing around autopilot. I think I wouldn't go as far as saying in hindsight. I think it's the 3 of them tally up very well together, and they can fit together like pieces of a puzzle. And I think if anyone missed one, obviously go back and take a look at it. But it's just understanding that whole picture. And I think anyone who's interested in looking down the route of autopilot, looking down the route of Intune, there's not a huge amount. It's making sure that you understand where you want to be down the line. There seems to be a lot of appetite for people wanting to remotely learn or remotely work. I think that is fair to say that would have been the case prior to lockdown anyway, but it is still a big thing at the moment, which is just remote working, learning from anywhere. That's pretty much really what I'm gauging from questions and feedback based on the comments we've had so far.
Awesome, thank you very much, Dave. And Gary, how about what you've seen?
First off, can you hear me? I'm hoping
yes.
You can actually hear my mic. Perfect. Cool. So I have done 3 webinars so far. 2 of them I've kind of played a little bit of Quizmaster, really, I would say. I was hosting a lot. We did one for Jump for School, and did another one with Jump for Protect with Ross. And the one that I did quite a lot on was the Jump Connect piece with Azure specifically. So, but off the back of that, the whole Jump Connect piece on Azure is basically setting up our environment to be remote and how everyone can work remotely in the easiest way possible, benefiting from that. So I've had a lot of people reaching out as well. And the webinar we did before, James, with Stuart as well, which I'm sure some people have seen, which was actually opening your estate remotely, accessing your DB remotely, things like that. And also, just to finish off, I've tried to do the poll. I don't know why I'm here, but I can't do one. So
you're not allowed to.
Yeah,
I unchecked that box because I knew what you guys would be doing. So.
Yeah, that's pretty much it from me, really.
Okay, awesome. So I'm going to close the poll, but the results look like 50% are Apple infrastructure related, 25% my Microsoft infrastructure, nothing about something else. Awesome. So hopefully that means no networking questions. Yay. And 25% I don't know why I'm here. So that would be interesting to see what whoever answered that has for us at some point in store.
That wasn't from any of us.
Could it be Ryan? I'd feel like that's fair enough.
We've given Ryan something to do already. For those of you not watching the chat, he has just posted a link to download previous webinars. So if you did miss any that you wanted to see, click that link after this webinar, because obviously this is going to be invigorating and the best webinar of the week.
So there's one I'm putting in chat now, which is the Atama link as well, because Ryan's just put the academia link in. So if you came here via Atama, which is our commercial side of business, then you'll have a look at that link as well, and you can download all the previous webinars or register and watch live the previous webinars. So while we are buying some time, because nobody's asking anything or making any comments, so you guys are going to need to do something, or we're going to have the most awkward webinar I think we've ever had, Gary.
Well, if we don't get any more questions by the time we're running out of things to say, maybe we'll go around and explain each in a bit more detail, the kind of things we get up to technically day to day.
Yeah,
see if that brings up any queries.
So the thing I wanted to go for is the general themes that we've seen. So Martin and Dave and Gary have mentioned the kind of things that they've seen in specific webinar Q&As at the end. But really, ultimately, the main message that we've got from I think this is the 17th webinar we've done in the last 3 weeks between us, is everyone wants to unify the management of their devices. So whether you've got a Windows estate or an Apple estate, the main thing is joining them together in some way. So you have as close to a single pane of glass is entirely possible. So we've spoken about things like the integration between Jamf and Intune. So you've got, the two things talking to one another and a bit of a single pane of glass, but also the importance of treating your ecosystem separately, because if you try and join everything into one, then what you'll end up with is not as much of a depth in feature set for one platform versus the other. So the unified message we've had is to treat your devices by the ecosystem that they have, but pick the right products and the right way of doing things. Is to sort of join everything together in the middle, but make sure the ecosystems are dealt with in the right way. Otherwise, you won't have as good an admin experience and as much control. So obviously, remote access and availability is another one, where we've looked at things like remotely logging in to your Mac using Microsoft Azure Active Directory, which has been quite a big thing for everybody. And being able to access a Mac estate remotely, as Martin said earlier. But the overriding thing is being able to deploy anything, anywhere, regardless of operating system, regardless of type of device, and regardless of ecosystem. So just in case anybody watching hasn't watched our previous webinars and hasn't sort of gone through all of that or gone through that journey with us, it is entirely possible to do that. There is absolutely nothing stopping you being able to take literally any device with any operating system, sending it directly to your users from distribution, having them unbox it and firing it up, and them self-enrolling, and everything automatically gets managed and deployed. So it's a really important message that if you don't think that's possible, that is definitely something to talk to us about, or watch some of the previous webinars on it, or a combination of the two. I think this conversation, maybe guys, a year ago, a couple of years ago, would have been very different. I think especially from the Windows side, because autopilot's quite new. But from an Apple side especially, there was still some things that were being worked out, I think.
Might be worth caveating that when James says literally any device with any operating system, if any of you are rocking up with a Sharp Zorus PDA from the late 90s, we may struggle for...
okay, any current device with a modern operating system that is used in the markets that we...
supported by the vendor.
Supported by the vendor. But then even Android has the Android Enterprise program now as well. So that's possible with certain models of Android device. So there we go. Hey, we got a question. Thank you very much, Joe. You've broken us out of the awkward chatter, because that was fun. So we want to switch MDMs from Meraki to Jamf, as you guys already probably know.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating. There we go. We're not going to be able to do that at the moment while all our iPads are at home with students and staff, and very much in use at the moment. Before we make the switch, I'm just interested in getting as much info as possible. So this is very much a Gary and Martin thing. What advice would you guys give in that scenario, other than don't just smash the button to flip over to Jamf, basically, immediately anyway?
I've already met Joe and spoke with Joe, and I believe, if it's the one I'm getting correct, I've done a demo with Joe as well.
Cool.
So I understand the frustrations you're having with your current MDM at the moment. And we've been through a lot of those things and how we can actually achieve fixing them with Jamf as well. So I'm obviously not going to sit here and badmouth Meraki, but how Jamf works compared to
because
Meraki.
We are a Meraki partner and they do very, very good things very well in specific arenas. But yeah, there we go.
So I did make sure I've got the right person, which is good. Yeah, it's kind of a pinpoint question for yourself, really, but all the issues that you have been having as well, we can definitely get that up and running with Jamf as well.
So just to give an idea, without going through the whole thing in general, there might be a few other people having a similar scenario. Do you want to give an idea of the kind of challenges that are being faced in this scenario, Gary? Like why it's a bad idea to try and do this when devices are based remotely at the moment?
Or why it's a bad idea switching over MDM?
Yeah, when devices are in the hands of users, not in the organization right now.
If you have an on-prem Jamf server, then there is a possibility that your MDM server can't talk outwards. Okay, so it's locked down in your network, and that's kind of one of the things that we covered on our. Well, it wasn't part of the VTC, was it? It was before, I believe, the working remotely.
Okay, yeah.
Webinar we did. Yeah, it was just before.
Yeah.
So you're having to have everything configured on-prem so you can talk outwards. If you've got Jamf Cloud, then obviously you actually can do that from home, your devices will be able to talk to your cloud-based service because everything's open outside. If it's not, you don't have the correct ports that are open, you might not be able to download applications, you might not be able to push out restrictions or policies or configuration profiles, things like that. So that's definitely something to consider before switching over, especially like you said at the time at the moment, it's ideally better to do that all in one place.
Yeah, I think largely it depends on what happens with the current situation as well, because if you're finding that the environment of the current MDM is creating like big barriers, it is possible to do it, but there's a lot of things to bear in mind. I would personally treat this as a good opportunity to do some information gathering about what you ultimately want to achieve. I'm sure you've done some of that already, but certainly these devices being remotely and being managed by an MDM that's not performing should really raise a load of things to consider that you want to make sure you cover off completely in with the new MDM once it's in. So using scenarios like this, and we've got a few of these going on at the moment for obvious reasons. We're saying use the time to information gather, talk to staff if it's an education environment, potentially talk to students and find out what they're finding is difficult. And then you basically have a roadmap and a plan of what you want to do and what you want to achieve with the new MDM based on the scenario that we're currently in, because you probably wouldn't have had that data before. So it's an interesting time to be doing this stuff. But I think there's certainly more we can have a chat about. And I know, obviously, Joe, if you've spoken to Gary, that's awesome already. So got another few then. I have a couple of specific Jamf Pro questions. One of them might be a bit cheeky, as I've been told I need academia to support, get more help or answer. Well, to be fair, this is effectively a free consultancy session, so you are more than welcome to ask away, and the account managers don't have any say in this, so there we go.
And actually, I recognise the name, and I think I recall the question. Okay. And I'd like to point out, in general, we have a general rule with the support guys that if we're getting questions on support, we're never just going to say, we flat out won't answer that. We'll always try and point you in the right direction, even if you don't have paid for support with us. Now, we will draw the line at remoting into your systems and configuring things for you for free, but we'll always point you in the right direction, send you to where the right answers are, if we possibly can.
Just on that quickly as well, and one of the reasons we do that, and this is actually a good point because we have this a fair bit, is, as Martin said, we always want to help, but there is a kind of a limit when we start helping, when a problem starts unraveling, and we always want to make sure we're avoiding the awkward conversation with you guys as customers where we start going down a road in, just to help out, and then we find out there's actually a much bigger problem behind it, and then we have to have the conversation with you like, okay, we've been helping so far, but now actually we're going to stop, and we'd rather set the expectation up front, as Martin said, point you in the right direction rather than saying no completely or just starting to help, because in the past we found that's just made things a little bit awkward. So we're not by any means going to say we'll never talk to you if you don't have a support contract, but at the same time we make sure that there's some expectations set. So Martin, I don't know if you want to take the first one then. How do I create an EA for the firmware volume, which sometimes gets added as part of an OS update as I'm trying to reach to people to get it removed?
Sure. Okay. So for the benefit of people that may not know what an EA is, so that's specific to Jamf Pro, and it stands for extension attribute. And they're basically ways you can gather additional information from your inventory, and you can attach scripts to them that gather information. So you can custom code your inventory information. So an EA for the firmware volume, which is sometimes gets added as part of the OS update. You mean to find out if that firmware volume has been added? It's an excellent question. I don't think I can recall having to set up an EA for that. So as a general rule, what I will do is, Ryan, if you can make a note of that question and add it to the Q&A for after, I will see if I can research and find out if one exists or if it's simple enough information, because creating custom EA scripts is very straightforward. You just return it into tags. On the Jamf Pro website, there are lots and lots of custom extension attributes, so it's always worth checking there. If you don't have a Jamf consultant to hand, if you don't have support with us direct, then generally that's where we will point, or we will look up for forum threads where it's been discussed how to do something similar. Within Jamf itself, if you go to create a custom attribute, there is a huge library of built-in ones. It is worthwhile going through there, and they are categorized. So in that case, going to hardware and storage to see if there's any storage volumes. But as I said, if we can add that to the follow-up questions, because I don't have an answer immediately to hand, but I'll be happy to look that up and see.
Okay. So the next one then, I'm guessing is going to be a you or a Gary one, which is, are there any plans to have the ability to set the login screen picture in macOS in the same way you can with iOS?
I'm
I
happy
don't
to
know the
answer that
full
one
answer on
too.
this, but as far as I know, I don't think so, because I know they're locking down stuff where we're not going to be able to change the login screen, for example. And with that, I have kind of pointed people into the direction of using something like no login AD or Nomad to actually customize that. But then this is another deeper question of whether you actually do generally need to use something like no load or Nomad. For people who don't know what no load and Nomad are, no login AD is the kind of it's the kind of login script and which you can edit to make it look good and look nice, and this works based on your on-prem Active Directory. It's basically Jamf Connect for AD. It's probably the best way to put it, rather than Jamf Connect being based just for Azure. You can edit the background, you can edit the logo, so when you log in, it looks all nice and pretty. You could use it just for that, but it depends whether you want to implement that in. Martin, I don't know if you know specifically if they're going to have if there's anything planned to change the login screen with macOS, but I don't believe there is.
So I haven't, and it's not in the current Jamf beta, and it's nothing I've seen from the current OS plans. That said, WWDC is coming up soon, and it's the kind of thing that would get announced there. So plug for Apple, do check in there, because they'll announce new things going in software. Funnily enough, we don't find these things out a huge amount of time before the general populace. Usually, even though we have very large strategic partnerships with both Apple and Jamf, it's only going to be a month or two before things happen that we're actually going to be briefed on them, even as gold partners. So
yeah, we tend to get some loose information a month before, and then as it gets closer to the time, we get more and more verbose information, to the point, especially from an Apple perspective. A lot of the EMEA information within Apple isn't released until either right before WWDC or after WWDC. As you all know, Apple play their cards very close to their chest, so we're always a bit careful about speculation and rumors and things like that. But currently, yeah, we can tell you what's there and what happens at the moment. And there's I've just noticed the follow up there saying, I've looked at Nomad for this, but it's not pretty.
I think the best way to answer that is it's possibly the prettiest it will get for now, I'm afraid. But we'll look into it and see if there is anything planned. I don't think there is, but we can certainly look into it.
Fair enough. Right, Dave, one for you. Any tips for dealing with Windows 10 UAC on machines off-net/staff working from home?
So, thank you very much for asking that. Makes me feel like it's worthwhile being here and not being completely excluded. Thank you very much. So, yeah, UAC can be a pain. It is there for a reason. However, in these kind of circumstances, yes, it can be a pain if the users aren't admins on the machine, and you guys as IT administrators cannot accept that prompt for them. When you're doing remote support on a Windows device with UAC enabled, it's worth bearing in mind what platform you're using to offer this remote support. So off the top of my head, TeamViewer, we used to use TeamViewer in various circumstances. And for example, the quick support that is executed by the user is running in the user context. And therefore, if a UAC prompt comes up, you do not see it. It is a pain. TeamViewer Host, on the other hand, and again, I'm sure there's alternatives out there, but TeamViewer Host does allow you to see that UAC prompt because it runs at system level. Again, it depends on the scenario you're looking at here. If they're out there in the wild and you have absolutely no control over these devices, whether it be over VPN, whether it be over Intune or any form of remote management solution, then your mileage may vary and you may encounter these kind of frustrations. Again, if you are able to if you're in a position where you can administer these devices via some way, shape or form, albeit remotely or hands-on, there are a couple of tricks out there to make certain applications exempt from UAC. Again, they're not coming from first-party manufacturers or anything like that. I can't really condone their use. It really depends on you guys as IT administrators, how much of a burden this is causing, how much of a bugbear. I would suggest that if you are supporting users at home and you have the likes of TeamViewer, do make sure it's a host version. I do appreciate that if you don't have VPNs with group policy, or you don't have Intune and you can't push down that initial host or support agent, it could be a little tricky, but there are ways around it. It just depends on your circumstances.
Okay, thank you very much, Dave. I want to take a deep breath for this one. 1 second. What is the best practice for user profile management / deletion under Jamf? I had an issue last semester where I created a logout script to delete the user profiles, and it resulted in the Jamf client being unresponsive on the machines and a build-up of pending MDM management commands on the Jamf user interface. Clearing those commands doesn't help. A search of Jamf Nation finds a thread with a solution from Rich Troughton to uninstall and reinstall the Jamf client / MDM config. This is no good for us, as it would uninstall the 802.1x config file that also comes down from Jamf. Have you ever encountered this issue before regarding profile deletion at logout? And can you comment on any best practices for profile management in general?
Wow. Okay. First, hi, Jonathan. Good to see you on here. We have encountered the requirement to remove the profiles. I have encountered the 802.1x challenges with config files. I don't, off the top of my head, recall having to solve both of those in tandem. And I would have some follow-up questions for that. That's a very specific and niche query. What I would suggest on this one, I know you have the help desk email for academia, and you have tier 3 support on your hosting with us. So if you wouldn't mind, either we can raise a ticket for you, and I will look into that more specifically. I may need to have a look at your environment a bit closer before I can really give you an answer on a solution for that. It depends somewhat on how your homes are set up, and a couple of other things. I think we should be able to script around that. The 802.1x really is a gotcha, though. So yeah, Gary, from your field engineer experience, any? The
only thing that pops to my mind, you've covered most of the stuff there that I would have said. It all depends on the environment. But do you remember when we've had the that login script?
Yeah.
When you have certain things ticked, it will just hang.
Yeah.
And it could be the same on logout as well.
Oh, yes. Well, if it is that, I can show you that in your Jamf environment specifically. If it's that, it's a very quick fix.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Didn't spring to mind, but yeah, we can either feel free to copy pasta your question to our help desk and put attention Martin and Gary, or if we don't see it in there, we'll get Ryan to add this to the follow-up questions and we'll raise a ticket for you on that.
Okay, cool. Thank you very much, guys. And Stuart, I've got no problems with you asking as many questions as you want. You're providing an awful lot of our content right now, so please feel free to keep going. Some No Machine questions. Can I set up a test for No Machine at home? Yes, you can. So
you kind of missed one. I just want to go over
the
one before that. It's not really a question. It's more of a statement, but we're not going to probably say yes to that, but just be careful if you are going to.
Oh, there's the sips off thing. Yeah, okay.
We can't
wasn't
say
tagged
yes
a question
to
because
that,
it's a comment. It wasn't a question. We don't have to answer it. It's fine. Quick, everybody hide. Okay, so yeah, No Machine questions. Can I set up a test for No Machine at home? Yes, you can. If you go to the No Machine website and you go to the Enterprise download section, and if somebody reminds me when I'm not talking, I'll post that in chat. Effectively, you have got a 30-day trial. So the demo that I did on our No Machine webinar, I set up at home. Admittedly, the cloud server was in a lab I have in Hetzner in Germany. It's just my personal test lab. But provided you've got something to install, No Machine cloud server on, and that can be Windows, Mac OS, or Linux if it's just for a test. And then you have a target Mac OS device. Absolutely, you can test a scenario at home. Can the No Machine blank screen have a message? It cannot. It is literally just a blank screen at the moment. There is, I believe, a feature request for that to be the case. But the thing that I don't think I actually mentioned on the webinar is when you blank the screen, this is quite useful information, it also disables the local keyboard and mouse. So basically, as far as the any user walking up to it's concerned, that machine is just off. Obviously, if they try and press the power button and stuff to turn it back on, then that can be a little bit painful. But I do believe that No Machine are working on being able to customize the blank screen message. But now it's the same as a lot of other remote desktop softwares where it's just literally blank screen, disable local USB. Does it work with Wacom tablets? So yes, and another type of yes, depending on how you want to deploy. So if you've got a local Wacom tablet that is plugged into your local device, as in you're a remote user at home, and a Wacom tablet plugged into a device, and you are connecting remotely to a Mac via No Machine, that Wacom tablet locally is going to act as effectively an input device, just like a normal mouse and a mouse cursor. So it will work from an input device perspective that way, i.e. you can move the mouse cursor around, you can right click, you can left click, but what it won't do is detect levels of pressure. If you want levels of pressure, then you can do USB forwarding on No Machine. So the local client can forward the USB connection of the Wacom tablet remotely to the remote machine, and provided the relevant drivers, etc., ink is enabled and things like that on the remote machine, that will work absolutely fine and there's no problem. The only thing you've got to bear in mind is latency. And as I said on the No Machine webinar, many times your mileage may vary because there are so many things, so many network hops, so many switches, routers, firewalls, all of that kind of stuff between the machine that is in your environment and the user's client machine that could affect the latency. But on a good network scenario, there's very little lag that you'll notice when using a USB device. But again, huge caveats and YMMV on that, because we've got no idea what your user's home internet connections are going to be like. So, but in theory, it does work. So there's two ways it will work. There is effectively a virtualized local mouse with a tablet, or if you want levels of pressure, then a USB forwarding will work fine for that as well. Last question from Stuart. The autopilot webinar is still set to register. Could it be set to watch now? So I want to wait for 10 seconds until Ryan chimes in, because Ryan, I think that's something you need to do, mate. So I'm going to say that the answer is yes, it can be set, but Ryan will be able to tell you exactly when it's going to be done. Martin, if you're muted. Trying to talk like Ryan, all right, now you're muted, mate.
Thanks for pointing that out.
There we go.
Ryan's already answered that in chat.
Oh, has he? Oh, there we go.
I'll have it later today.
Feel free to ask any Windows stuff. Just chuck it, Dave. Now, let's just.
Yeah, I'm here.
Not just Windows, Microsoft in general. All sorts of things Dave's good at.
Wearing Bermuda shorts.
Playing could always play guitar for us. We could do a little jam session,
Office 365 migrations.
One thing we learned earlier, though, when we were prepping for the webinar, is Dave is not very good at securely fixing his wardrobe doors. So if you notice a wardrobe door behind Dave disappear at any point, then that might be why. That happened while we were.
If this turns into a let's list things we're not good at, we could be here a while.
Yeah.
I will add, I didn't build it from scratch. I dragged it about 15 meters from my house, which is probably why the integrity of the doors is a little bit questionable right now. I think if I stomp my feet hard enough, you might just see two doors just come flying.
Please don't do that. Like on behalf of the company, that's a health and safety thing. Don't do that while you're in your own home. Thank you very much.
It's fine. The door would land about a foot behind me. I'm safe.
Okay, wonderful. So something I wanted to throw at chat, which is I'm expecting patch responses for this, is we've had a really good response to the VTC in general. And yes, Joe, don't worry, we'll come back to you quickly. So what it would be really interesting to get from you guys is the kind of stuff you'd want to see from us going forward. So while the VTC is effectively at the end of this webinar over as a virtual conference, we are going to continue doing more webinars, more series of webinars about different things and covering a variety of different topics and sort of over a bit more breadth than we have done over the VTC. So we'd absolutely love to get your feedback on what you would like to see and how we can sort of do more of this stuff that's of interest to you. We're very conscious we don't don't want to just repeat the same thing over and over again and do the same kind of presentation or demo on a different day. I know, Dave, you've thrown ideas around, like, for example, Office 365 security, or more in depth around Teams and things like that.
Yep.
I think Gary and Martin, we've spoken about Apple deployment environments and things to prep for, environmental stuff that people miss out, health checks, all of that kind of thing. But everybody that's watching, it'd be really great to sort of get your opinions on, is that the kind of thing you want to see? Do you want to see something completely different or left field? And that'd be really good feedback for us. And feel free to feedback after this as well. So I've bought enough time for 2 more questions to come in. Yay!
You might have lost Martin. I don't know.
Martin does look very, very static at the moment. Are you still there, Martin? Are you gone? He did say my internet might die at some point. So
I think he said that sarcastically, and he's tempting fate now.
Yeah,
it's okay. We have a Gary as well, so it's fine. And he's definitely dropped off because now we're back to boy band view. Yeah.
Awesome.
So anyway, a couple of questions about Microsoft Office iPad apps, if that's possible to answer, please. Yes, it is.
So, yes, we can answer that question for you. I suppose, just kind of reading between the lines a little bit here, you are questioning about how you can go about getting these apps installed on devices, getting the actual apps pushed down, whatever your existing MDM platform is. So obviously we'll mention Jamf as a potential one there. But when it actually comes to editing documents in Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and Martin is back. When it comes to editing Word, Excel, and PowerPoint, you will need to have a license to cover those apps. Now, that is typically the A3/E3 level, or if you've got Microsoft Business Standard, Microsoft 365 Business Standard or above. In other words, when you've got your A1 and E1 licenses, which are cloud only, and then you've got your A1, A3s, for example. They are the ones that include your 5 device license. So those 5 devices can be a Windows device, a Mac device, an iPad, an Android tablet. So as long as you have the correct licenses, you can edit these files on iOS devices.
And just to point out on the Jamf perspective, that with Jamf, they could be seamlessly pushed down to the devices that you need.
There we go. This is why we all work so well together.
Not a shameless plug at all whatsoever.
Absolutely not. Of course not. I would never do such a thing.
Okay, another Windows one. Can you remind me how to enroll Windows devices to Intune without user interaction? How do you get device details?
This is interesting because is it Mac-based or is this
Windows devices, Gary? It says Windows devices.
Oh, it does. Wow,
can you have a Windows-based Mac device?
I did not see that. Apologies.
Wake up. So yes, what I would so the actual name of the technology is Autopilot, and it is awesome. If you want to know a little bit more about Autopilot and how it can work for you, depending on what your environment is, you might be looking at one-to-one device deployments for teachers in education. Maybe it's one-for-one for students in education and Windows devices, or you could have shared IT labs. In the business world, it'll probably more likely be one-to-one devices. So Autopilot comes in 2 flavors, one platform, 2 flavors, user-driven and self-deploying. So user-driven would be your one-to-ones and self-deploying would be your IT labs. If you do want to find out more, there is a webinar on that, which is in the link that Ryan sent below. So take a look at that once it is uploaded, which Ryan has said, no pressure, will be up and running at some point today.
Yeah, we did have a couple of follow-up questions after that webinar that I had some inbound from the account managers over the last couple of days on. The process is there is a more automated process where we do it for you, as we literally just went over, but there is, and I'll say this again, Dave, because I know you were kind of scared of saying this in the last webinar. If you want us to do the enrollment for you, you need to click a link that or an admin of your Office 365 tenant needs to click a link that allows us to upload a CSV via the Microsoft Partner Portal to your tenant. So that is the more automated way of getting those devices into your Intune. Otherwise, we can send you a CSV and you can do it yourself. But if you're buying large numbers of devices in batches, us doing it is a lot easier, but it does require you to grant us permissions to do so. Don't worry, it's not scary. We don't have access to anything other than literally just pushing device IDs and serial numbers at your Intune instance. But there is a bit of a process to go through. So it's pretty straightforward. So I'm more than happy to show you through it. We can, show you all the documentation and stuff behind it as well. Where are we now? Is there a way to enable web Office 365 apps without OneDrive enabled?
Yes. You can turn
I thought you were just going to finish on yes then for a minute. That'd have been worse.
Well, I think I almost have on a couple of previous questions, haven't I? So yes, you can turn off features within Office 365. Again, depends on how you currently roll out Office 365 licensing to users. If you do it on a one-by-one level, then your best bet is just as you're assigning that license to the user, there's a little drop down at the bottom, which will actually expand the features within that license, and you can just move that slider to Intune off. Again, you can do that with pretty much every feature that is part of a license. What is awesome, and what many people don't know, is that you can actually do what's known as group-based license assignment. So in this, it means that you go into Azure AD, which is what Office 365 piggybacks off anyway. You create a group of people, so you might have, accounting team, you might have a marketing team or sales team, whatever, and you can say, I want the sales team to have a E3 license, but I don't want them to have SharePoint or Intune or Yammer, for example, like that. So you can customize which features users get. If your users already have OneDrive enabled, and you want to pull that back so they don't use it, then you can do so, but it's probably going to be a bit more of a scripted route where you can pull those users into some form of variable and just say turn off OneDrive.
Awesome. Thank you very much. This is going to be an interesting one. So we have G Suite at our school. So we have Gmail hosted email accounts. We can't do anything with MS Office apps until we have an Outlook email account. We have a 365 school agreement, but don't use it. Can we enable SSO so there's only one email address?
I'm trying to rack my brain back a little bit now. Martin, you and I and Gary were looking at this a few weeks back, and I can't remember if you can do SSO from G Suite. You can sign into G Suite using your Azure AD creds, can't you?
Yeah, correct. So the way you have to do this is you have to make Azure for Office 365 your canonical identity and have G Suite then pull that auth information across, and then you can use SSO to both systems.
But that means you have to flip the authoritative to Azure AD, right?
So
So you wouldn't create your users in G Suite anymore. If you do turn this on so that you do leverage 365, but you still want to rely on the Google Suite set of services with the same username and password, you would need to move your users, or at least set your users up in Azure AD or 365, and just always create them in there from that point onwards.
Okay. Any more to add on that, Gary? Anything from you?
Nope, that's spot on. I think if it's, I know obviously Joe's looking at the iPad deployment stuff, but with Macs as well, there's I think the G password sync. Can't remember what it's called off the top of my head as well, which will sync password back towards AD as well.
I could make a really, really good plug here and say if you're on G Suite and you aren't invested in it heavily, 365 is very, 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 very good.
We are also a Google partner. You are biased because you're a Microsoft specialist.
I'm biased. Yeah.
The only thing
all
I
you
would
needed was that at the end.
I'm heavily biased towards Apple, and I have to say Office 365 is a very good product.
Yes, okay.
Me
anyway,
really good.
I think in general, I'm going to toe the company line as well as a personal line here. There are both platforms do offer a good service, but there are nuances depending on which one would be the right one for you based on context. So I know, Dave loves Microsoft, obviously, and Martin and Gary have professed their love for Microsoft as well, but depending on how you work as an organization, there are some things that G Suite does better, and there are some things that Office 365 does better. So the general approach we take, and Joe, I'm guessing, because I have a feeling I've heard your name mentioned as well before, you've spoken to TAG, Tom Abel-Green, internally in academia before. The general approach is we look at what the learning outcome or the desired learning outcomes are, forget the technology in the meantime, look at the desired learning outcomes, and figure out what you need to do and what technology you need to be able to achieve the outcomes. We do the same thing with business as well. Actually, the methodology is largely the same. Rather than teaching and learning outcomes, we look at what your business objectives are, efficiency, productivity, etc. And you kind of forget the tech until you've done that bit. And then you work backwards and go, right, was G Suite right? Is Office 365 right for us? Okay, now we know what we need to achieve. That one's right. Now what do we want to do in terms of devices, etc.? So, Joe, you've probably been through that journey. But for anybody else who hasn't, it's a really, really, really useful journey to go through. And it's not a service or anything we charge for. We have specialists that will come and talk to you about that. So there you go. There's my plug.
Wow.
Okay, so I nearly missed this one. Any comments on SCCM versus Intune machines, AD bound, but off net / not connected to VPN 24/7?
So, are you not going to answer that one, James?
Yes, to be fair, though, there is potentially a zero tier argument here, Martin, but we'll get onto that.
I was thinking the same thing when I read the conversation.
Dave, do you want to answer your one, and then we can augment it with something left field?
Yeah, of course. So SCCM and Intune, you can have co-management of. So you can use SCCM for devices that predominantly live on site, or at least at some point in their life have lived on site, to push down that initial image. Ongoing MDM management of those devices, so remote lock, remote wipe, reset, all those kind of bits and pieces, you'll get the benefits from Intune out of that. Furthermore, you can do hybrid Azure AD joined devices, again, so they live both in Intune and SCCM. The only thing I'd say about the two of them, bearing in mind they are off net, is don't try and push any large packages down. We're going to use this phrase a lot on this call. Your mileage may vary. Pushing down AutoCAD over somebody's home connection, their kids watching Netflix won't be your best fan. But they can absolutely coexist. The two work hand in hand. They have since been designed to work hand in hand, and even more so, it's Microsoft is just strengthening that integration. So Intune, if you haven't got it's a cloud something gateway on SCCM that makes your SCCM environment external remotely, Intune will do a very good job at helping you manage those devices that are external. And again, you can still push down applications from Intune.
But if you would like devices that are outside your environment to be able to talk to things that are inside your environment, Martin,
then there is a possibility of using a software-defined network such as Zero Tier. If you look back through the links of our previous webinars, the specifics of it were actually for accessing Macs remotely, as we mentioned at the beginning of this one. And the second half of that is using a product called Zero Tier. The setup for it's very straightforward for what I was showing in the webinar, which was how to access admin your Macs while they're off-site. The principle is the same. To work in an AD or an SCCM with AD bindings, there would be a little more work involved, because you would need to make sure that the routes for the virtual network will route to your AD network while that's enabled, and make sure that the DNS is resolving for internal network as well. However, it is very feasible for that to set up and work. So how Zero Tier works as an SDN, it's a software-defined network that can be always on, as long as there's some kind of internet path back to your network. So it's essentially like having a site-to-site VPN that's nailed up, but for your client machines. So wherever they go, they don't have to dial up the VPN. Basically, if there's a network connection, they have access to the local network, and it is encrypted end-to-end.
Yeah, which is pretty cool. So you don't actually have to worry about VPN. We've been using it internally for things like cloud distribution points, being able to get machines to access a cloud distribution point without having to open it up to the outside world. Same thing for admin on the back end, and the accessing your Apple devices remotely was the title of the webinar. We did that on, Martin, I think. Yeah, that allows you to sort of get back-end SSH access into a Mac without having to use a VPN or be on net for any reason. So it's basically like having literally like having an always-on VPN 24/7 without taking up any VPN processing or licenses or anything like that as well. So there's a number of different ways or number of different uses for that. That's potentially one of them, but we would always go with best practice route first. And if not, this is an option. Thing to mention that we always forget to mention about Zero Tier is it's free for up to 100 devices. But if you want the unlimited plan, it is a whopping $29 a month for unlimited devices, unlimited networks, unlimited everything. So it's a lot cheaper than running a VPN infrastructure. I will move on. So, Stuart lied, apparently. So, as we said, Stuart, feel free to keep them coming. I have another question. With MS Office available on the Mac App Store, we are using this method to install and update our Catalina appliance. Is there a fix to the issue where some apps update when an update is available, but some refuse with the generic MDM error, and we are forced to delete the app locally and then force an update via Jamf? Is there a better way to achieve this? Just a point that Jonathan's has jumped in actually and said there is a issue fixed recently in Jamf 10.21. Is that your response, Martin?
I just want to put in here that yeah, that's me and mine both know that's MDM error 72 because we've seen it probably in every.
Actually, not necessarily. Error 72 is when apps don't push out, and the fix for that currently, it's down to an Apple PI, is a separate issue. But the fix for that, if you run into MDM error 72, is to clear your errors from Jamf, push a random other app that hasn't pushed down before, and then the other apps will trickle through. For this one, yes, I believe this with updates not going through. There was a fix for that, which was to manually go in and update the version number on it. However, if you're not on 10.21.0, there was a product issue with updates through MDM that was fixed in 10.21.0 for Jamf.
Stuart's just responded saying I'm on 10.21.
Okay, so it's not that.
That stumped you.
Yes, it has.
I'm guessing you could possibly look at the route of if you'd already had that set up to do automatic updates for your applications beforehand. Now you've updated it to the latest version, kind of turn that off and then back on and give it a go again.
Are you literally saying turn it off and on again? Was that?
Nope.
Is that?
Nope. just the updates to basically just to kind of refresh them. So if you've got automatic updates pushed out, then turn that off and turn it back on. Yeah, but in a way, yes. Otherwise, I don't think there's a kind of quick fix for it, I'm afraid, at the moment.
Okay, so we've got another one in. Does anyone know if Office 365 for Mac supports device licensing / volume activation in a student lab environment? We've been using Office for Mac 2019 up to this point, and it has been the only one that supports volume activation. The Windows Office 365 apparently now supports device licensing, but no mention of Mac.
I don't think it does.
So one thing I will add to that, and I would need to look a little bit more in depth on the education side of things, but if you put this in a concept that I'm kind of familiar with, which is remote desktop servers, for example. Remote desktop servers are a shared device. Classrooms in a lab, PCs or whatever it might be in a lab are a shared device. You don't have the concept of shared device licensing with your A1 or E1 plans. You would need you'd need a 3-level license, so an A3 or E3. Can't get my words out there, sorry. But that one, I think, from my side at least, unless Gary, Martin, you know of anything in that particular instance.
I remember possibly reading this that it wasn't. I'll come back to you on that, but I remember coming up against this maybe last year, at the end towards last year. I think someone had the same question. We kind of delved into it, and it wasn't available. But we'll come back to you on that. So not 100%.
Yeah, and I'm with you guys. I'm relatively sure that it's not currently available, but I believe I saw something in the roadmap a few weeks ago, because Microsoft are actually, I don't know if you guys have seen the generic Microsoft roadmap, but they're pretty verbose in terms of what they say they're working on and when they're releasing things. So it's worth having a check of that. So I think we are getting towards the end of the questions and therefore the end of the webinar. So if there's anything else you guys want to ask us, then we've got a few minutes left still, so please feel free to do that. Otherwise, we'll put the thank you plate up that I'm sure you've all seen a number of times by now, and we'll hang around in chat for a little bit before we close out fully. But before then, there is another one. How good is the management of Android and iOS devices in Intune compared to G Suite? What can you set up on those?
iOS, and again, this is not a heartless plug here. If you want proper iOS management, you are going to be wanting to look at Jamf. If you're looking at Intune for iOS, then the feature stack doesn't add up anywhere near to the degree that you would get on Jamf. Sorry, James, wanted to say something.
No, I was going to say this goes back to the point I was making earlier about the management by ecosystem rather than management by management platform. So we're moving more towards this strategy of manage the ecosystems but join them together, as opposed to try and manage everything in one platform. And I know that sounds frustrating, but you genuinely get a better experience, a more secure experience, and a more up-to-date experience. But from an Android perspective, while Intune can manage Android, the Android Enterprise program gives you more depth as well. You get some of that in G Suite, but Android Enterprise gives you quite a bit more in-depth control of devices, but it's only certain devices. There's a hardware compatibility list. It's not just blanket every Android device that you can with G Suite.
I think the question to that one is, I mean, as you probably know, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different policies that you can apply in Intune to any form of devices. It's really what you want to achieve. I appreciate there's 3 minutes left to this, so that could overrun, but it depends on what you want to achieve. I do get the argument for single pane of glass, but James is right. If you do want to properly manage your devices, you do need to start looking at that ecosystems management platform.
I'm just going to post a link in chat as well, because a lot of people don't know that Android Enterprise exists. So there is a link to that. Not that we're saying don't use Intune, because it is capable of doing it, but it's like and I'll asterisk this with, this is my personal opinion, not the opinion of Academia Limited or any associated subsidiaries. I've said that so many times. Management by ecosystem is more painful to set up in the first place, because you've got multiple systems to deal with, but the outcome you get is way, way, way better, and you have way more control. And because the products you're using are very specific to that ecosystem, things like security updates are a lot quicker and feature updates are a lot quicker, rather than relying on one company to maintain updates and feature availability across the board. That's it's actually what Microsoft said when they announced their partnership with Jamf, is that as Microsoft, as a massive company, being focused on Intune, they're Windows first, and they're going to be Windows first because that's the primary platform they're catering for. Whereas with Apple, they are, by their own admission, not as quick as Jamf to release new features. Jamf have a day zero policy where if an MDM control feature is available in macOS or iOS, the day that's released, it will be released as an update in Jamf. Microsoft don't do that, and it's the same thing when it comes to Android. So if you've got a mixed environment with Apple devices, Windows devices, and Android devices, our recommendation is Jamf for your Apple stuff, Intune for your Windows stuff, and Android Enterprise for your Android stuff. So
I just want to add in there as well, anything you're working on compliance-wise with Windows, Intune will integrate with Jamf Pro, and it does work seamlessly well. That's really, really good. So it will be across the whole board.
Yeah. And again, to summarize, I suppose it depends on what your end goal is for each of these device platforms. But yeah, exactly what James said. Stick within the ecosystem wherever possible.
Cool. Right. I think on that note, then we will wrap up. So, as I said, I'll stick the thank you video with some music and stuff on in a second, and we'll hang around in chat if you just want to, say anything to us or ask anything you forgot about. And this is, for us, this is the end of the VTC, so we can now go and have a well-deserved rest over the bank holiday weekend, because there's been a lot of these going on. But thank you guys for attending the VTC in general. Especially thank you for attending this webinar and actually asking us questions, because it could have been, as I said, like very, very short and more awkward than a Donald Trump fact denial speech if you hadn't have asked us anything at all. So I know that was a very random reference. So thanks very much, guys. And we'll hang around in chat, as I said, for a few minutes. We'll stick the outro on now.
Well done to ruffle some people up at the end, Jack. Love that. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks all.